Buddy, and welcome to the webcast today, Beyond the Test, Building a Winning 2013 Optimization Plan. My name is Jeff Cram from Eyesight Design. We're a digital agency here in Boston, Massachusetts, and Portland, Oregon, and we're thrilled to have you all here today. I think we've still got people joining, but we're going to jump right in. So a lot of you heard about this from Which Test Won. We're a huge fan of Which Test Won. We also do a lot of optimization ourselves, and I think now is about the time of the year that we find our clients and ourselves are starting to reflect on 2012 in terms of what went well, what didn't go well, but also starting to plan for 2013. And with how important optimization's been in our role as marketers in 2012, we see it only increasing in structure and process and in the investment for 2013. So what we want to do today is take you through about 45 minutes of looking at what are the factors that go into creating a successful optimization plan in the new year, and how can we all actually put that together. Since this is a webinar and we can't interact live in person, we do have the hashtag Measure2013, and I do encourage you to share your own thoughts. If you've got tips or things that you're doing for 2013, we would love to hear about it, as I'm sure other folks on the attendee list or the webinar would as well. Looking down the folks that are on the webinar today, we've got a great lineup. I mean, all of you, clearly from your titles and what you're doing, we've got folks from major brands that are in charge of optimization. We've got consultants that are leading optimization for clients, and clearly a lot of people that are thinking hard about how optimization fits into your day-to-day. So I do encourage you to share with one another through tweeting with this hashtag as we go through it. And we'll also be taking questions at the end. So if there's things that come to mind as we go through this, there's a chat panel on your webinar interface. Feel free to drop a question in, and we'll get to those toward the end of it. So let's get going. So here's what we're going to do. Next 45 minutes. We're going to talk about the way testing is changing as we move from 2012 to 2013, and we're seeing some pretty important trends that marketers are starting to need to get a hold of in order to make that transition. And then I'm going to pass it over to my colleague in our Portland, Oregon office, Ryan Summers, and we're going to go through the 5 key elements of what it takes to go into successful optimization plans. So we've been doing this with clients, we've been doing this with ourselves, and we tried to distill the core components of a successful optimization plan down for you so we can run through those in a pretty succinct fashion. Throughout this webinar, we'll be talking about some real-life examples in terms of where testing has worked particularly well and what some of those lessons learned are. And to keep us all on our toes, there's going to be a few pop quizzes or polls as we go through this, just to keep some audience interaction. So with that said, let's get going. And I think no better place to start than with a poll to kind of test all of our intuition around analytics. So we're big fans of Which Test Won. For those of you that have been following the blog and the series, you may have seen stories from one of our clients, KinderCare. So we're very fortunate to be working with the KinderCare brand. They run a large nationwide network of learning centers for infants and toddlers and families that are really looking to put their kids in great places for just ongoing learning. And one of the things that interesting about their web channel is that they are heavily dependent upon the website to instigate that initial interaction. So they very much sell the service in person. It's very much based upon getting someone in the center. But the website itself is the key demand generation and lead generation initiation point, oftentimes, usually for kind of how people will find a center near them, research it, and eventually schedule a tour. So we did a test this year that was pretty significant. It was simply on a button. I'm sure it's one of those things. It's one of the easier things to test for all of us. And we said, what is the call to action on this button? So when someone searches for a center near them, you're going to get a map return with the search results that have the centers closest to you. And when you click on this button, it brings up a pop-up window, and it gives you a little bit more information. But really what it is it's the lead form for an inquiry to learn more about scheduling a tour, tuition, all the questions that a parent would have before they would even consider putting their kid in one of the centers. So this button is basically the key conversion pathway for KinderCare as it relates to their lead generation channel, and actually hadn't, up until this last year, hadn't been significantly tested. So we did a really simple test over the course of a month or two in looking at what the call to action would perform the best related to lead generation, and getting people to actually not just click on the button, but actually fill out the form to actually initiate a conversation and come in and talk more about the center. So there were 4 options, and I want you to think about this and think about the last screen you saw. We had tuition and openings, schedule a tour, contact this center, and tour this center. You know, all 4 you know, have kind of clear kind of scent in terms of next steps that we thought a prospective parent or prospective client of KinderCare would want. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to launch a poll here. So in a minute you should see a poll pop up on your screen. And I'm going to leave this open for around 30 seconds here, just to let people vote. So of the 4 buttons, which one do you think perform the best? And the results are coming in. We've got people voting for, I'm not sure if everybody can see the results, but we've got people coming in all four buttons, so this should be interesting. I'll leave it up for about 15 more seconds. All right, we've got some good good results here. If I close this, I think you'll be able to see see the results, or maybe not. So basically, before I tell you the winner, I'll tell you what you guys thought. There were 2 clear leaders. You all thought tuition and openings. 46% of you thought tuition and openings was the best. 31% thought tour the center, followed by 13% schedule tour, 10% contact the center. So let's see who won. The wisdom of the crowd prevails. Tuition and openings was the clear winner. It was staggering the impact this had on KinderCare's business. I think, you know, oftentimes changing out buttons, you know, have big lift impacts, but oftentimes don't have a big impact on the business. In this case, because it was such a critical conversion pathway, the tuition and openings winning button, when it was deployed kind of site-wide and as the winner, had a 282% increase in the form conversion. So that's people that would search on a center and actually fill out the form after having the different call to action. But more than that, it had a 57% increase on the overall leads for the site. And when you look at the scale of KinderCare's business and the fact that I think they have 1,700 centers and they're nationwide, this was a huge impact on their bottom line and a huge impact on their demand gen and lead flow that was coming into these centers, and was one of many tests we did over the course of the year with them, but was an example of something that immediately had a bottom line impact. And I think it's one of the things that I know probably all of you are so passionate about testing about is truly these small changes truly do add up to big results, and increasingly they add up to results that aren't just good lift for that conversion sequence, but they're lift for the business. And as we turn the corner into 2013 and the role of testing becomes more formalized, it's becoming really exciting, I think, how all of us, how marketing in general is actually able to quantify the value of testing to the business and justify more testing and justify more focus on just the digital channel to begin with. So a few things before I pass it over to Ryan. One is looking at the changing landscape for testing in 2013. And as we're starting to work with our clients and starting to look at how we interface them, we see a few interesting things happening. One is that, and I don't need to tell all of you this, is that the entry costs for accessing testing technology has never been lower from a pure technology standpoint. I think I like to say, you know, Google Website Optimizer, now Google Content Experiments, was probably the best and worst thing in a lot of ways that's happened to the optimization space. The best, obviously, because it reduced the entry point to free for anybody that wanted to experiment with testing, and people immediately can jump in The worst, and maybe not the worst, but I think because it encouraged really ad hoc, immediate behavior, oftentimes organizations kind of have stuck with testing as more of an informal discipline, testing as more of something that an individual does on an ad hoc basis. And because there hasn't been maybe more of an investment around the tools and the overall processes that go around the tools, oftentimes it never really reaches that escape velocity out of a single person into a program that the organization can really grab hold of. And I think sometimes that's easier to justify doing a bigger program when you're actually spending money on the tools. So if you're invested in an Omniture or WebTrends or something on the more enterprise testing suite level, oftentimes there is a parallel investment in the people that will go along with that. And I think sometimes with Google Website Optimizer, Google Content Experiments, and Optimizely, and some of these low-cost tools, they're fantastic, but they don't always have the corresponding investment. So that's one thing, but the good news is that we do have technology at our fingertips. I think most of us are probably using tools that you see on the screen. I know we heavily use most of these in our day-to-day, in addition to some of the more enterprise testing suites. The other thing that's really interesting is as we talk about processes. I don't know if all of you saw this, but Adobe put out a report, I think rather recently, their 2012 Digital Marketing Optimization Survey. And what Adobe did is they surveyed I think 1,700 marketers and talked about their outlook for testing, how they approach it, what's important to them. And some of the research that really stuck out to me was around processes. So what you're looking at here is when they asked folks about what's the process you use for testing, overwhelmingly what they found is that organizations really don't have process. 39% self-identified saying, look, we don't have any defined process. 45% said, we have a manual process, which I found usually means that there's kind of individuals responsible for it, and it's very ad hoc. It kind of lives in a loose assortment of PowerPoint decks and Excel spreadsheets, and requires a few people to have kind of expert use of the tools, and it kind of stays there. As you go up the chain, you do have folks, 5% self-identified as having a sophisticated process. I think that's kind of the way they worded that question probably scared a lot of people off from calling themselves sophisticated. But what you see here is a really strong tilt towards either no process or something very manual and ad hoc. And I think this really does speak to the state of where we are today, meaning there's a lot of testing happening, but there aren't a lot of organizations that have truly operationalized the active testing and made it cross-department or even cross-organization. And so that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. The other thing that was really interesting is looking at the investment that's being spent on testing versus acquisition. And this probably won't surprise anyone, but I think it's interesting to put in these terms. So marketers on average are spending $92 to acquire traffic and $1 to optimize. So whether or not whether or not your balance is less or more of that, I think the interesting thing is as you think about that is asking yourself the question, what is the right ratio of actually improving the experience that we're building versus trying to acquire more customers or trying to acquire more? And at what point is the churn of acquisition ultimately hurting the business or not yielding the result that you need to yield? And obviously we're not playing with monopoly money here. The testing all really does have a real impact on the business, and I think being able to quantify for whatever your business model is and whatever your spend is on the proportion of dollars that you're going to spend towards improving the experience in testing is really important. And I think increasingly most folks would probably agree that ratio definitely, that gap has to be closed, right? It can't be 92 to 1. It's not going to be 50-50, but at the same time there has to be more investment in continuous improvement in testing, and I think we're continuing to see that take hold, at least with our clients and where we see folks spending their marketing dollars. So before I pass this off to Ryan, I'd like to really hit on 4 key themes that we're seeing. So we think there's a huge opportunity for organizations to raise the bar for how they think about testing, not just as a tactic in their marketing arsenal, but as a strategic discipline that you really take into the new year and own. And I think there's important shifts happening, and depending upon where your organization or where your clients' organizations are on kind of their maturity curve, we see these 4 shifts happening. So I'll run through these one at a time. One is what we just talked about, this shift from ad hoc testing, which is usually the result of getting hands-on with the tool, getting really excited about it, having some quick wins, but never really making it over the hump to having an actual strategic program around optimization and testing. Are there clear processes defined for optimization? Is this something the organization understands? Is the value of this communicated to a wider group or a group beyond marketing? And there's a lot that goes into creating a strategic program around optimization, and increasingly we're seeing, and all the research shows this, that the organizations that have committed to this program versus just doing testing are yielding far more results in ROI from these efforts. There was a really good report from eConsultancy and Red Eye that came out just a few months ago about optimization as a discipline, and I think it's available on the eConsultancy site. And overwhelmingly what they found, and it's not exactly a surprise, but that the organizations that have actually defined a strategic program around optimization versus the ones that are still optimizing but are treating it as more tactically and as more ad hoc, overwhelmingly have better results. And I think this is where we're trying to get a lot of our clients to, in terms of really treating this like a strategic program. Second big shift that I think is happening, or that needs to happen, and this is an important one and I think hasn't been talked about a lot, the shift from marketing to experience. So everyone's probably seen the tidal wave of activity and interest around customer experience as a discipline. There's a lot of focus on just what is good customer experience, and how does valuing customers and putting customers at the center of our business correlate to revenue and business and just loyalty and net promoter scores and a lot of the qualitative aspects around what we measure today. But I think in terms of thinking about optimization as a discipline, there's a big shift that starts to happen when you think about optimizing your marketing activities versus optimizing your customer experience. And increasingly we're seeing organizations kind of take the blinders off and saying, this isn't just about campaigns. This isn't just about making more from the marketing dollars we're spending. This is about looking at the entire customer journey, how folks are interacting with our brands, where each of those touch points are, and where we can have an optimization strategy that optimizes each of those touch points independently and prioritizes those. So how does our personalization and targeting strategy work? How does our content strategy, how do we look at optimizing that as it relates to delivering experiences across different channels? Looking at mobile, looking at on-site search, looking at things that impact the overall customer experience or digital experience in a meaningful way, but aren't all at the landing page level, aren't all at the keyword level, and kind of get out of this marketing spend. And a lot of times, when we're framing this up with organizations, we see increasingly still, even for very robust testing efforts, there's a focus on optimizing your marketing, not optimizing the experience. And I think for us as optimization professionals and marketing leaders inside the organization, we need to reframe that discussion in 2013, and we need to present this to our clients and to our organizations as a larger experience framework that we're looking to optimize. And what comes from that is a reprioritization of what's important. And in some cases, it's moving away from maybe some of the traditional marketing optimization tactics. In some cases, it might be doubling down on some of them if you've identified that's really the critical part in your business that needs to be addressed. But it's about having a broader perspective as it relates to experience. Third, this shift from lift to learnings. And I think that it's so intoxicating, and we fall into this too. When you're doing your first test, there's so much low-hanging fruit on sites, and there's so many things to be identified and fixed that it becomes really exciting to do the test and trumpet the 1,000% conversion improvement, or just like we did, the 282% form improvement. And those should be celebrated and those should be shared. But what we see happening in the more mature organizations and in the more mature just testing programs in general is a shift from not just celebrating the lift, but socializing the learnings. And as we become more adaptive in our marketing and in the evolution of our digital channel, making sure that more people in the company understand the success and failure of what's happening with testing. And I think as marketers and folks that have put ourselves on the line for testing as an investment, oftentimes we're hesitant to share things that haven't gone right, but usually there's some really important lessons in there. And there's usually not a place in the organization where there's a centralized repository of knowledge that people can learn from and pick up and take into their own world. And we look at who needs to have this information. You look at product managers, customer service, people in other parts of the organization. There's learnings from testing that can be more enterprise-wide. And I think that's going to be one of the big shifts we hopefully see more of in 2013, of companies really grabbing onto the learnings in addition to celebrating the lift. And last, this idea of an analytics hero, shifting that to really a culture of optimization. And by analytics hero, this isn't something that is a bad thing. It takes a champion inside the organization typically to really get testing, evangelize it, and make it happen. They have to oftentimes be the jack of all trades, the expert users of the tools, the analyst, and oftentimes the person that might implement the changes, especially if you're using something like Optimize that allows you just to implement things without developers oftentimes. So, and this hero or this individual is integral to testing being a part of an organization and frankly to having any success with testing. But what we're seeing is that oftentimes if this person or this small department is siloed, it really stunts the opportunity for optimization to take hold. And increasingly we're looking at how can organizations really develop a culture of optimization that's more than one person, that doesn't exist in a bunch of random spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations that are in someone's back pocket, but instead is something that's well communicated, well shared, and part of the culture of the organization. And I think we're seeing examples of that with our clients, at least, where that's taking hold, that's making its way into boardroom conversations or C-suite conversations, and more people have access and are able to influence the way that the data is used and put to use inside organizations. So these are kind of the four themes we see in terms of how organizations are making that turn. What we'd like to do now is actually shift to the second part of our presentation, and at this point I'm going to be handing this over to my colleague in Portland, Oregon. I'm in Boston right now, so we're trying a cross-country webinar to you, so bear with us if there's any hiccups. But I want to introduce Ryan Summers. So Ryan Summers has been with us for 5 years. He's our analytics and testing practice lead. He's the one that's usually on the front lines of working with clients in putting together optimization programs. He's been the lead on the KinderCare case study that I shared earlier. What Ryan's going to talk about today is how what the successful elements of an optimization plan look like. So what we're trying to do is both share some of the tactics, but also look at the forest from the trees and say, how can we as marketers and folks that care about optimization go into an organization and actually put together a successful plan? So with that, I am going to pass my control over to Ryan and let him take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, you're great.
Great. So as we're here encouraging you guys today that 2013 is the year. This is the New Year's resolution to evolve your testing practice. We know that organizations still struggle to get the critical mass really needed to make it work well. So what I wanted to share today is what we have found to be kind of the 5 most important factors that we've seen help organizations grow their optimization program. So I think I can move the slide down, Jeff.
Yeah, if you just hit the down arrow, it should work. If that's not working, I'll try one other thing.
So while Jeff's working on the slides, I guess while we're harping about testing, kind of frame the importance around it. You guys are all marketers and marketing teams that work across many different tactics like SEO, PPC, social media, working with affiliate partners. And there's no doubt these are all very necessary channels. But we really feel that testing is that practice that really layers on top of all these other initiatives and can help each of them become more cost effective. So having a culture of testing is really kind of the glue that helps bind these disciplines together. And as a result, there's an overall experience for your customers, and you gain institutional knowledge that results in better return. So with that, let's start out with a little quiz to get an idea from you in the audience who you think you best represent as that testing action hero that Jeff described earlier. So we have MacGyver, the lone wolf. You use whatever tools you can scrape together. We have CSI. You have all the best tools and all the best minds. Enhance. We've got the A-team. You only are called in when there's a really big problem. Mulder and Scully, your small team in the basement. You know the truth is out there, but no one really believes you. And then lastly, we have Paul Blart, Mall Cop. Observe and report only, but you're not testing.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we are going to put this poll back on just like we did before, and this is probably the most important poll of the webinar. This is the one where we really find out who's on the call, and I have a hypothesis, but I don't want to spoil it. So we're going to leave this up for about 30 seconds, and all right, here the results come in, and I don't think you all could see the last results. So after this finishes, I'll read them off to you, and then Ryan, you can read into what kind of folks we have on the line based on the results.
Great.
All right, we'll close it in 5 more seconds. All right, now the results may or may not surprise you. Let me see if I can put these up on screen. Here we go. So there we go, Ryan. I don't know what you read into this, but we've got a lot of either X-Files fans on the line or people that identify with Mulder and Scully. MacGyver is a close second, which would probably support our kind of theory for the analytics hero.
I agree. I think this is really a good example of how you illustrated the shift from hero to cultural shift as being really one of the key factors in what moves an optimization team from being the lone wolf into being integrated into the practice. And so as you can see from the range of replies here in the quiz, optimization teams come in all forms. And so the first foundational step towards optimizing the program really is building the team with the right people. From our experience, the most important people on the optimization team are the executive sponsor and the project manager. I think the executive sponsor really has the trust of the organization that helps provide the resources needed to fill out the rest of the team. And the project manager has their finger on the pulse of all the moving pieces that it takes to make those resources work together. So together, the executive sponsor and the project manager really own the outcome of the program and just share the success, which ultimately really helps culture shift towards data-driven decision-making. The team on the ground is kind of an Ocean's 11 style eclectic group of unlikely heroes. You have the analyst, who's constantly sifting through data to find areas of friction and the right opportunities for testing. Copywriter, who's helping carefully craft the language to improve the call to action. The creative team. The creative team really helps assure that the brand authenticity and design isn't trumped by the conversion. And developers. The developers know the platform, both the testing platform and the technology platform, the CMS, the back-end code, and have the front-end skills to put the finishing touches on the test experiences so they really look like they're a piece of the overall design.
And Ryan, on the slides, if you can just tab down, you should have control now.
Oh, okay, great. So once you have your team assembled, they need a mission. It's critical that everyone on the team really has the same perspective on what success is for your optimization program, so that they're all working together to a common goal. There are really two types of metrics to consider if you're trying to build a testing practice: qualitative and quantitative. Each help provide context for what platform you'll need to use to run your experiment and collect your metrics. The metrics from web analytics tools and customer satisfaction surveys help determine how to segment your completed tests for analysis and how to personalize your upcoming tests. Quantitative key performance indicators help take the familiar form of the web analytics metrics, but depending on the goals you have for your site, they might be really specific business driving KPIs like revenue, or they could be more experience driven KPIs like video duration. The key really to picking the right KPIs is that they have meaning to the business outside of just your testing group, and that there's agreement from the executive sponsor that these are the metrics that they know will help illustrate the value of testing, as well as increasing the bottom line for your organization. And qualitative KPIs, they really help put checks and balances on metrics like conversion rate. So consider like a sales process that begins from a low quality lead that came from a high converting landing page. The test in the quantitative may have appeared to be a successful test from that vantage point, but really when you look at it, it delivered poor business value from a qualitative standpoint. So given that we have our metrics kind of laid out into those two fields, now that can really help you determine on how to prioritize by the potential lift that you can get from different tests and different pieces of your site. To help prioritize what you put together, we look at this impact versus effort analysis. It's kind of part of our initial planning phase, and this is something you can do by hypothesizing and using your project manager to help get estimates from other team members. And essentially you put this together at the forefront of your planning phase, and it refines itself over time. As you do more and more testing, you start to get a really good picture of how much effort it takes to test in some of these areas, and also how much impact you're getting from those tests. The Marketing Sherpa's benchmark report kind of helps us see an example of where marketers have found the most impactful elements and the efforts required to test them. We see here that copy, call to action, layout, these all have a higher impact than images like images, navigation, and forms, according to this 2011 survey. We also feel like segmentation, segmenting your data is one of the most useful aspects of a testing program. Segmenting your data after a test helps identify the audiences that you can target with more personalized tests. When you look at the aggregate from a test, you may see a very different perspective than if you start segmenting around some areas like region or seasonality that can help shed light on why that test was or wasn't successful, or that maybe some audiences responded a lot better than other audiences. They shed light on how to design and write and prioritize. So you can see here that most effective segment were built off of offline and CRM data, and are also used the least. So remember in that ecosystem diagram, using additional tools outside of your testing platform can really help bolster your ability to measure and act. So that's a pretty good segue to the next topic, which is getting the right technology. Your first tool, of course, is your testing platform, something like Test and Target or SiteSpect or Optimizely or Content Experiments. There are a lot of different tools out there. We use a lot of them here at iSight with our clients, but I think really the most important things to consider around your technology stack or your tools for testing are the ones that help you assure that your data is reliable and that you're flexible to your IT and technology constraints to really help allow you to collect and segment your data in a useful way for analysis and accuracy. So when you're out there doing your selection process, make sure that the tool you pick fits the pace and skills of your team, and that you build your foundation on accuracy and solid data. Testing platforms typically collect data for the duration of their tests, but then that data is archived and not very accessible. When the test ends, the data can get stored for that test, but it doesn't really help paint that broader picture with your analytics. So integration in your analytics tool into the testing platform frees that data and allows you to reference tests and test experiences later on. Many test platforms can let you set these test experiences as custom variables and port that data into your analytics. So you have that data available for segmentation by source, or you can correlate it with other metrics that you've already set up in your analytics platform. You can even initiate different metrics to qualify your test after the fact if you don't have all of the right metrics configured when you run your test, like bounce rate, for example. You could go back into your analytics and apply that metric after the test is ran to see what the impact was on bounce rate. I think we all know that A/B testing isn't really a new concept. Traditional marketers have been doing A/B testing for quite a while. So I guess I encourage you guys to think about not A/B testing only as something you can do with your website, but consider all the ways to collect metrics for other platforms like email subject line and PPC content. Just make sure that when you do this, you're planning and validating your test, and you're still using the concepts from A/B testing, the reporting on statistical significance, and vetting your data to make sure it's accurate. So we have a team. We've talked about our mission. We have our tools. I think a lot of times execution can really be the hardest part for some organizations. Jeff mentioned our work with KinderCare, and I think this is a really good example of how a process has been put in place to help an organization, a large organization, thrive in this space of optimization. iSight and KinderCare have been testing partners now for almost 2 years. So we want to share the story of how this large organization has adopted these processes. They've really helped change their company culture. It's truly made a shift that I think now you could talk to almost anyone there in the marketing group, and they would say that they don't make any decisions without testing first. Um, we want to verify that tests are planned methodically. Encourage you to have a structured plan for any test that you're going to run. A repeatable test plan assures that all your bases are covered, and it gives the project managers all of the details they need to make sure to resource and prioritize. A simple framework really just is kind of a key to communication across departments and disciplines. Having interdepartmental buy-in on the process really helps expand your testing capabilities and resources. Focus on customer engagement funnels, and this really helps triage and prioritize the biggest areas of opportunity. So this is kind of one of the components that we'll build in a strategy phase, where we look at the sources, look at the key landing pages, and the experience that we want the visitors, the customers to come through, and kind of helps expose to us where we need to focus the user experience and testing to help with that experience. I think most importantly is share your successes and failures. The only bad test is one that you don't learn from. So detailed reports can be delivered to the project team, while high-level summaries can be delivered to executives or business line owners, or other constituents of the outcomes of the test who aren't really hands-on with the tests. The continued diligence in informing the organization about testing is really the best way to get other teams involved and get them collaborating on test ideas. Because really, the manifestation of a successful testing culture is that other groups see the impact and they really want to get involved and start contributing their ideas to the greater goal. So I think your testing program should probably keep you pretty busy. What we found from our work with our clients, and iSight and KinderCare specifically, have pretty rigorous planning, testing, and prioritizing schedule. We set goals, and we have a structured routine that's both tactical and strategic. Some of the outcomes that you can get from doing this testing and looking at segmentation is better understanding of the visitors that are coming to your site. So here's an example of kind of that analysis process, looking at personas and synthesizing those into the way that we approach design. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read our optimization blog. We call it Always Be Testing. And for KinderCare and iSight, we really hold that mantra to be true. And we've seen that by holding to that, we've seen some really significant impact. So by pairing up with their teams and our teams in these processes, we've been able to run more than 50 tests this year. And by testing and using the insights from testing, KinderCare has really increased their lead conversion quite a bit, 29% compared to last year, which I think is a pretty good testament to the value that testing brings to the table. And so with that overview of kind of our process and framework around kind of launching your testing practice, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff to talk a little bit more about our practice group here.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And I think we're just wrapping up here. I know we promised 45 minutes. We won't be much longer than this, but I think a few things that were takeaways from Ryan, and if you want to go on mute, Ryan. a little bit of background noise, but a few things that were takeaways. The KinderCare example I think is interesting because in talking to the KinderCare team, and I just asked this question yesterday, Ryan mentioned 50 plus tests over the course of the year. They had a huge lift over 2012, but there wasn't any one single test that was kind of, the button test that we showed at the beginning was important, but it was a culmination of a lot of smaller things that contributed to learnings that impacted their overall business. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that we've had working with clients on a more of a program basis versus a test basis. Is that oftentimes with testing you get kind of the heart monitor blips where you'll do a test, it'll be really successful, it'll go up, and then your business will kind of return back to its normal pace once that test has run its course. And if you can get to the point where you're consistently building upon each test and the learnings from small tests are impacting bigger projects or bigger redesigns, that's when you reach a point where testing is having an impact that's sustainable and is far greater than a big percentage lift. And I think that's what's been so impressive about what Ryan and team have done with KinderCare in adopting that. What the one sales pitch slide that I will show you, and it's more than a sales pitch, there's good content on this site as well, is because this is so important to our business, we created kind of a framework that we call Day 2. And Day 2 is really just a way of thinking. And the idea behind Day 2 is that all the real work in improving your online channel, in improving your customer experience, starts after you launch something, whether that's a website, a mobile site, whatever you've launched, you don't really know what's happening until you start to tweak, look at the data, and improve. And we've seen over and over that organizations really struggle with having the same effort, structure, and process around the post-launch activities that they had around the projects to begin with. So we created this Day 2 framework to basically help operationalize testing and help our clients actually step into more confidently have a sustainable program and over time take more and more control of that. So it's not meant to outsource everything to an external partner and have the vendor run everything as much as it is to continually get your internal teams up to speed, and it's been very successful. If there are folks on this webinar that are interested about help or need help in aspects of the testing program, we'd be more than happy to talk about how this Day 2 program could fit into your business. But more than that, we'd be really just interested in hearing your stories and learning about what's happening. We blog a lot on the topic. For those of you that registered, you should have got access also on the thank you page to the big book of landing pages, which is just an inspirational guide of 50 to 60 examples of how organizations are approaching landing pages and working on some other thought leadership and pieces that will be coming out soon. So the way to get in touch with Ryan and I, we're both available via email, so jcram@eyesightdesign.com, our summers at eyesightdesign.com, company website, eyesightdesign.com, and we blog about optimization and our thinking at getreadyforday2.com, and really encourage you to be part of the conversation. I do want to, we have time for a few questions before we wrap up, so if there's anyone on the line that has a question or has been tweeting, just go into the chat window and we can pick it up. So one question here, and Ryan, you can come off mute. This is for you. Is how we've talked a lot about experience and experience design, but the question is kind of how, as an analyst in your role, you've been able to bring people in from the experience design team to be part of the testing process. And that's a good question because oftentimes the folks responsible for experience on the site aren't one with data and aren't necessarily even talking to the folks that are looking at the data or actually optimizing.
Well, that's a really good question, and I think we're really fortunate here at Eyesight that our testing team not only sits next to lots of the designers between creative and experience, but we also have them kind of as honorary members of the testing group. And when we approach an issue of friction that we really think isn't necessarily just a matter of where a button is on a page or something, we kind of take the data as the proof point to the fact that the friction exists and bring it to the larger group, including creative and experience design, to brainstorm around how we can approach the the friction from the user's perspective
Mhm.
before we go in and try to implement some kind of experiment.
Great. Another question that came in, and Ryan, I'll let you answer this one as well, was a question on the tools. So, other than the testing tools that we had on one of the earlier slides, which ones do you find you use on a regular basis, and kind of for what purposes? So, if you could expand a little bit more on the technology side of it.
Sure. And from testing tools, we use Adobe Test and Target quite extensively. Um, it's an enterprise tool that really has a very wide range of capabilities, including uh, the targeting. It has really robust um, rule sets for building your segments. And so I think the tools that allow you to build segments off of different rules and user behavior are the ones that we tend to get the most use out of. But other tools like web analytics can really be helpful for starting off, even if you're you're limited to the tools budget that you can get, because by having those custom variables in there, it kind of supplements some of the more advanced features from an analytic or from a testing platform.
Great. I've got a few more questions rolling in. I'll keep rolling through these. We'll take this right up to 2 o'clock Eastern, and then we'll cut it off. But there's a question on process. So we've seen that process is a key, really key towards having success. But where is there any advice on where folks can find it? Documentation on a detailed process. Has anybody in the industry kind of publish something significant that would be kind of a process starting point? And Ryan, I don't know if you've had resources that you've used in the past.
Yeah. So SiteSpect and Web Analytics Association have a published white paper that you can get from SiteSpect that I've found to be very useful in kind of framing the process. And I believe that white paper you were talking about from Adobe, Jeff, also had some pretty good insights on that.
That's right. Yeah, that report from Adobe, it wasn't as much a process diagram, but I think it showed how organizations are approaching process and kind of at what stages. I'll say too, the e-consultancy report I mentioned, while it wasn't a step-by-step, the one thing they had in that report that was interesting was kind of a maturity model. So they kind of showed where folks were on the optimization maturity and kind of what the next steps were. So we'll take one more question, and it's an appropriate one to end on. Is what would be our first step? So if this person said, I'm currently a Mulder and Scully, and I want to grow from X Files. What's the first step that we would recommend to make testing a more significant part of the organization? And I know, Ryan, you're a huge X Files fan, so do you even want to move from being a Mulder and Scully, or how does someone?
Well, I think the appropriate answer for that question is to shed some light. The X-Files team always has their flashlight, and so if you shine that light on a test that has some significant relevance to somebody in the organization who may not currently be an executive sponsor, but it could be a product developer or a business line owner, someone who would be very interested in that outcome as it affects their business goals, and put it into a report that helps tell a story. Kind of get away from the numbers and the graphs and write a narrative about how you found the friction that you tested against, how you came to the conclusion that you did with your test, and what the business driving impact was that affected that particular person, and see if you can get them to jump on board and help shine some light on that.
Great. And I think from my perspective, I'd probably add two things. One is attach yourself to a revenue stream. So if you
Yeah.
oftentimes if you want to get noticed, pick a revenue stream, even if it's a small one, and attach yourself to it, and I guarantee you that you will start to get attention, assuming that revenue stream starts moving in the right direction. And then the second one, in terms of socializing, is just how can you, the question of how can you make this more public, right? And one of the tactics I've seen interesting is having more people in the organization kind of vote, much like we did at the beginning of the survey. So if you post a test you're about to do and you actually like print out versions of it and put it next to the water cooler or in a very public place and have people circle or email it out and have people kind of vote on which one they think will win, it gets a lot of interest in testing, and especially when it's related to your business. And what I tend to see is that folks will start talking about it. They'll be interested in the results, and it can often be an icebreaker to having a bigger conversation about the role of testing in the organization. So with that, we are at the hour. I want to thank all of you that attended the webinar. I want to thank Ryan for his part in putting it together. I hope you found it useful. Again, this is my name's Jeff Cram. We're from iSight Design, a digital agency and optimization consultancy. We're here in Boston if you happen to be in the area, and also in Portland, Oregon. And I want to wish you happy optimizing in 2013. Thank you all.
Thank you.